I'm Claire, and April 18th became the day I discovered just how dangerous entitled heirs can be when they believe the universe revolves around their demands. That Thursday started like countless others arriving at the office at coffee, steaming in my grip, sorting through quarterly reports for our most crucial client, the same account that had rescued our company from financial ruin just a year prior. Then chaos erupted. The door burst open with violent force. Enter Nathaniel Carter, 19 years old, CEO's son, destined inheritor of an empire he'd never earned through honest labor. He stormed in wearing a designer suit that hung awkwardly on his thin frame, eyes burning with the rage only pampered children exhibit when someone dares defy them. "You think you can dismiss me?" he roared, his fist crashing onto my desk. "When I issue commands, you execute them." I remained seated, composed, professional. "Nathaniel, I don't accept directives from interns." His face flushed crimson. "I'm the future CEO. You'll regret this insubordination." I arched an eyebrow. "Then I'll address you when you actually become CEO. Until that moment," I gestured gracefully toward the exit. "Please vacate my office." I knew dismissing him so curtly would have consequences. I simply didn't anticipate the retaliation would come that very evening. Let me rewind several months to when CEO Richard Carter announced his son would join the company for experiential learning. Most of us expected Nathaniel to shadow various departments briefly before growing bored and retreating to whatever luxury paradise he'd emerged from. We were completely mistaken. Nathaniel received the title of Junior Operations Director, a position I'd earned through 5 grueling years of dedication, sacrifice, and countless late nights. He possessed 0 qualifications and 0 comprehension of our company's operations. Yet somehow, in his twisted logic, this meant I should follow his orders. Initially, I accommodated him. I discreetly corrected his errors. I salvaged his catastrophic proposals before they reached clients. I even covered his missed deadlines. Why? Because I treasured my career. Because I believed in this organization. Perhaps because I hoped he'd mature. That hope was misplaced. The crisis erupted 2 weeks before that fateful Thursday. Nathaniel invaded my office, tossed a file across my desk, and declared, "Terminate the Johnson team." They irritated me. The Johnson team, my team, had just secured a $3.5 million contract. "I won't dismiss anyone because they annoyed you," I replied, maintaining my composure. His response chilled me. "I'll inform my father you refused a direct command." I held his gaze unflinchingly. "Go ahead." He stormed out in fury. I assumed that would end it. I believed his father would instill some sense. But I'd underestimated how far entitlement could stretch. During the annual spring gala, I represented our international clients, the same division I'd constructed from nothing over 6 years. Everything seemed perfect. The venue sparkled. Investors were satisfied. For a brief moment, I believed hard work actually mattered. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Richard Carter. "Claire, please visit my office first thing tomorrow morning." My stomach knotted. Sleep evaded me that night. By 7:30 a.m., I stood before Richard's desk. He avoided eye contact. "Claire, I'm afraid I must check your inbox first," I interrupted, leaning forward. His face went ashen. What Richard didn't know was that I'd been recording everything. He stared at his screen like it contained explosives. The color vanished from his complexion. He clicked through the folder I'd quietly sent him the previous night. Inside were 43 forwarded emails, every single one from Nathaniel. Some were absurd, others borderline criminal. Nathaniel ordering departments to falsify delivery reports, demanding finance teams manipulate numbers to improve his forecasts, emailing me directly with threats like, "Simply obey or I'll ensure your termination." I stood silently, allowing Richard to absorb it all. Finally, he collapsed into his chair with a heavy sigh. "I had no idea." I crossed my arms. "Didn't you?" He flinched. The truth was, he had known at least partially. But willful ignorance is easier when it's your golden child misbehaving. Richard buried his face in his hands. "Claire, why didn't you approach me sooner?" I kept my voice steady. "Because I believed this company valued merit, and I didn't want to cause your family's destruction." He looked up sharply, eyes mixing guilt and fear. "My board can never discover this." I gave him a hard stare. "I'm not here to threaten you, Richard. I'm here because your son invaded my office yesterday demanding I fire a team that just saved you $3.5 million. When I refused, he vowed to destroy my career." I paused, letting that penetrate. I came because I won't allow a 19-year-old brat to abuse people while you ignore it. The only sound was the air conditioner's hum. Then Richard whispered, "What do you want?" I smiled slightly. "I want my career protected. I want the Johnson team safeguarded. I want this madness stopped before it destroys you." "Nathaniel, that's your problem to solve." I left Richard's office with my pulse racing. This wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about justice, ensuring hard work still counted. But by Monday, I realized Nathaniel wouldn't surrender. It began with whispers. Emails suddenly excluded me. Meetings rescheduled without notification. Budget approvals delayed. The subtle craft of corporate warfare. I caught Nathaniel smirking outside a strategy meeting I'd been banned from. He actually winked at me. Here's what entitled people like Nathaniel never grasp. They think power is a game they can manipulate. They never realize that sometimes those they attempt to crush are the ones supporting the entire foundation. A week later, Richard summoned me again. "You're correct," he said quietly. "Nathaniel's uncontrollable." I raised an eyebrow. "Good. So, you've confronted him?" Richard looked away. "I tried. He won't listen. He threatened that if I don't eliminate you, he'll approach the board and create chaos." I actually laughed. 19 years old and threatening board action. Impressive. Richard remained serious. "Claire, I'm forced to suspend you temporarily." To appease him, "It's not personal." I stared at him coldly. "It's never personal, is it?" He winced. "I'll make this right, I promise." But I already knew he wouldn't confront his son. He'd sacrifice me, the person who built his international division, because it was easier. I nodded politely and departed with dignity. But I wasn't defeated, because Richard had no clue what I'd been preparing for months. 3 months before Nathaniel's office invasion, I'd noticed shifts. Clients grew nervous. Senior managers asked strange questions. Several high-level partnerships I'd personally negotiated were suddenly reassigned. Nathaniel was positioning himself to control the international division I'd built from scratch, and Richard was enabling him. So I did something they didn't expect. I began documenting everything systematically, but I wasn't foolish enough to work alone. I approached 2 trusted allies, Marta Chen, our compliance head, and David Alvarez, our senior legal counsel. Both had worked with me for years and quietly worried about Nathaniel's behavior. Over coffee, off the record, I revealed everything I'd gathered. Initially, Marta shook her head. "Claire, this is career suicide," David agreed. "If the board sees this," I met their eyes. "They need to see this. Not for me, for the company." After a long pause, Marta leaned in. "I'm with you." David nodded. "Me too." We spent late nights cross-referencing contracts Nathaniel had compromised. We tracked compliance violations that could have triggered investigations. David drafted confidential memos outlining potential breaches of fiduciary duty. Marta discovered that one of Nathaniel's projects had nearly violated international trade laws. Had I not intervened quietly 2 months earlier, the fallout could have destroyed the company. By the time Richard suspended me, I wasn't worried. The board wouldn't hear about Nathaniel's misconduct from me, they'd hear it from their own compliance and legal departments. The final piece involved our largest international client, Eastbridge Global Holdings. I'd built that relationship personally and knew they had serious concerns about Nathaniel after a disastrous meeting he'd led without me. I met with Michelle Tan, their head of partnerships, for lunch. No pressure, no agenda. When I casually asked about their future contract plans, Michelle gave me a knowing look. "Claire, off the record, if you're gone, so are we." I blinked. "Seriously?" She nodded. "We don't work with companies run by amateurs." That was all I needed. By the time my suspension hit internal email, 2 things happened simultaneously. Marta and David submitted their joint report directly to the board, and Eastbridge Global sent a formal letter of concern to Richard Carter, warning about withdrawing future business if leadership changes weren't made. I didn't feel triumphant, just ready, because Nathaniel had spent months believing he could eliminate me with empty threats and childish tantrums. What he didn't understand was simple. You can't bully people who have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The official notice arrived at 9:17 a.m. on Tuesday. Claire Patterson, administrative leave, pending internal review. Cold, sterile, announcing my apparent dismissal. But what Richard didn't know, the review had already begun, and it wasn't about me. At 10:05 a.m., Marta and David submitted their joint report directly to the board. No drama, No accusations, just cold, hard facts. Nathaniel had attempted to manipulate financial data repeatedly. He'd issued directives beyond his authority, risking contractual violations. He'd interfered with compliance procedures, and Richard had allowed it to continue. The report concluded with a simple recommendation: we advise immediate review of leadership, accountability, and potential breaches of fiduciary duty. By 11:30 a.m., the boardroom was in crisis mode. Marta updated me via text: Richard looks like he's aged a decade in an hour. Nathaniel tried blaming you. Didn't work. Board isn't buying it. I read every message with strange calm. I hadn't leaked anything to the board myself. The truth had risen on its own. Around p.m., Richard called me repeatedly. Finally, I answered: Claire, we need to talk. We met in his office late that afternoon. For once, Nathaniel wasn't lurking nearby. Richard looked hollow, his confident CEO mask shattered. The board wants to meet with you tomorrow morning, he said quietly. I nodded, and they've requested Nathaniel's immediate resignation and for me to step down temporarily pending review. I didn't flinch. Sounds appropriate. Richard gave me a bitter smile. You really did it. You destroyed him. I met his gaze steadily. I didn't destroy anyone. Nathaniel destroyed himself. I just refused to cover it up. For a moment, I thought he'd explode. Instead, he slumped forward. You were the best we had, he whispered. I should have supported you. I remained silent. In that moment, there was nothing left to say. The next morning, I entered the boardroom I'd never been invited to before. 12 directors, serious faces, cold eyes. But when I sat down, something shifted. They didn't grill me. They didn't accuse. They asked for my perspective. I delivered it professionally, calmly, backed with facts. I explained the deals I'd negotiated, the partnerships I'd protected, the risks I'd mitigated that Nathaniel's recklessness had created. Heads nodded around the table. By meeting's end, the chairman leaned forward. Claire, we'd like you to consider stepping into an interim leadership role for the international division while we restructure. I could hardly believe it. I wasn't just reinstated, I was promoted. But even as I shook hands and smiled politely, part of me stayed guarded. Promotions come and go, titles shift, power is temporary, but respect, that's earned. And it's the one thing Nathaniel Carter would never recover. 2 weeks later, Nathaniel vanished. No farewell email, no announcement, just gone. I heard whispers he'd been shipped overseas to manage family investments. Corporate speak for quiet banishment to avoid scandal. Richard stepped down voluntarily, citing personal reasons. The company memo thanked him for his service and highlighted his commitment to future transition efforts. Corporate speak for we won't fire you publicly if you disappear quietly. On my first official day as interim director of international operations, I walked past Nathaniel's empty corner office. A nameplate lay abandoned on the desk. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. This wasn't about proving a point. It was about protecting people who'd been risking their careers under his chaotic shadow. I called my team together. No fancy speeches, no victory laps, just one simple promise. I don't care about titles or last names. I care about work, integrity, and respect. That's how we move forward together. For the first time in weeks, I saw real relief on their faces. Within a month, Eastbridge Global renewed their contract. Not because we begged, but because Michelle Tan called personally and said, we want to work with leaders who know what they're doing. That's you. Other clients followed. Deals started closing again. Stability returned. The company didn't just recover, it thrived. Then came the ultimate twist. The board invited me for a private dinner. Sitting across from people who once viewed me as just another department head, I realized something fundamental had changed. They weren't looking at me as a placeholder anymore. They were looking at me as a leader. The chairman spoke first. Claire, we'd like to offer you the permanent role of Vice President of International Operations, effective immediately. I paused, letting that sink in. I have conditions. He smiled. Let's hear them. I laid them out clearly. 0 tolerance for nepotism in leadership roles. Transparent accountability standards for all executives. Full authority to build and protect my team. My way. The chairman nodded after each demand. Agreed. I signed the contract a week later. Not for the title, not even for the raise, but to ensure no one else would fight the same battles I did just to receive basic dignity. As for Nathaniel, last I heard, He was burning through his trust fund on some startup in Singapore, trying to impress investors who saw right through him. Funny how that works. When you build your world on entitlement and fear, it collapses the moment someone refuses to play along. Looking back, I realized something profound. Nathaniel tried to destroy my career because I wouldn't follow his orders. Richard tried to sacrifice me to save himself, but neither understood the truth about power. Real power doesn't come from titles or threats. It comes from competence, character, and the people who trust you to lead them well. And that's something no spoiled heir and no cowardly CEO can ever fake. The day I learned how dangerous entitled heirs can be became the day I discovered how powerful authentic leadership truly is. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting battles, but from refusing to lose your integrity in the process. In the end, I didn't just survive the storm. I learned to dance in the rain while building something stronger than what came before. And that's a lesson worth more than any title or corner office could ever be.